Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. Hey, what's going on? Coach Luca here with the Vigor Life Podcast and the Boeing train going in the background. I feel like that could be the intro. But today we're here with none other than Chris Toombs. And what's so awesome about Chris, that number one, we'll dig in kind of Chris's background, but that he's the strength and conditioning coach for the Seattle Seawolves, which we've partnered with. So they're here for 4 days a week training at Vigor Ground. Going pretty savage, which is fantastic. Last year's champions, this year's champions. See what I did there? Yeah, this year's champions too, returning champions. But Chris has a wealth of knowledge and experience in the world of strength and conditioning, and we have like all these great conversations just being here at the gym, talking, training, and everything else. And I was like, man, I got to get you on a podcast to share some of this wisdom and go down a rabbit hole. We don't know where we're going to go. I never have this scripted, as you guys know. But what I wanted to start with is like your kind of a timeline a little bit of your career, because I really think that asking somebody and seeing where they come from gives so much more insight on the wisdom that you have. For instance, like if somebody's, never trained, 40 kids in a high school, but theoretically they know a lot of stuff and they're telling me, and then I hear what they have or haven't done, I take it with a lot of, grain of salt, because it's like, oh, okay, so you read a book about it. Okay, but what about if I gave you a team of, 75, 80 football players or rugby players or whatever else? And I know enough about you, but I'd like to actually know even more as far as like, your career in strength and conditioning, to get a little bit of an insight.
Great, yeah, thanks. Well, first and foremost, it's a pleasure to be on. It's pretty humbling, actually. I just want to reinforce the kind of conversations we have downstairs have been great so far. So, hopefully this will add a little bit more depth to some of that for the listening group. The short version or the long version? 25 years in the strength and conditioning industry. I'll go as kind of smoothly as possible. Doing a degree going back into the early 90s. They didn't have strength and conditioning degrees back then, so I did exercise science and human movement studies as my kind of formal education. 7 years in the private sector, so I worked as a personal trainer for 7 years before.
I didn't. See, that's why I wanted to ask you this, because I didn't know that. But that's great. We'll kind of return to that.
We can go back to that. It's actually one of the most, and I say this as a strength and conditioning coach, and I don't really differentiate myself as a strength and conditioning coach or a personal trainer.
Agreed. Yep.
But that's another rabbit hole that we can possibly go down too. But the reality of that particular experience, one, it was great. I lived in London as a young guy, 20-something. Enjoyed that experience. But I think one of the things that really resonated with me on reflection from that particular area was that I learned to deal with a multitude of people, from company CEOs to actually young athletes. So a very, very broad spectrum of people, and connect with different people from different backgrounds, and some extremely wealthy people, some extremely diligent athletes. So it was a really, really kind of great learning experience from a people and delivery standpoint. So that was the kind of first 7 years of my professional career in the fitness industry. I literally did a speculative application one day to a professional rugby team in England called Leicester Tigers. Leicester Tigers happened to win, Leicester Tigers had 7 or 8 very high profile England rugby players at the time. 2003, England won the Rugby World Cup. So I was kind of immersed in the sort of academy and the first team kind of delivery of strength and power prescriptions.
So essentially, like, you mean the junior teams, right? Like the younger teams.
Yeah, so the academy is sort of the under 21 age group, and then they feed into the sort of fully professional team. But the fully professional team at that point had just come off winning the championship in England 4 times in a row, and also winning the European competition like the Champions League in soccer 2 years in a row as well. So they had not just these 8 England players, but probably 20 or 25 really, really high quality internationals from all over the world as well. And again, it was one of those weird situations that, as is the way with professional sport, the head coach for whatever reason at that time got removed from his position along with 11 senior staff. There was 2 of us actually who kind of survived that kind of transitional period, but within a year, both of us had moved on to other professional teams as well. So I worked then down in Wales, in Cardiff, for the Cardiff Blues, doing a multitude of roles from, again, the academy straight through to sort of senior strength and conditioning coach with the main program in the fully professional league. And I guess that's kind of where if I was going to say I made my name, that's kind of where I made my name, with developing physically some of the kind of Welsh rugby's, I guess, premier talent over the last 10 or 12 years, some of them just retiring now. You still get texts from guys who are kind of going into their 30s, who are kind of on the back end of their career, saying how valuable some of the stuff they did in their early 20s was, which is pretty fulfilling as a coach, as you know. So that takes us to around about 2013. I was very fortunate and blessed to marry an American. So again, I guess from my kind of career progression and transition, I did 9 years at the Cardiff Blues, and at that point in time, I'd done a multitude of roles, from developing young players to working on the coalface with the first team. Won a few trophies in professional rugby, which was again pretty satisfying. But the family decided to sort of take a hit and cross the pond to Seattle 1.0. So Seattle 1.0, I worked for a rugby organisation, bearing in mind professional rugby in North America didn't exist at that point in time. So 2014, 2015, I worked for a company called Adaptation, who I guess predominantly looking to build rugby's profile in North America through a multitude of domains, and one of them was alignment with USA national team and supporting some of the challenges around that. Very fortunate that I trained a couple of athletes who had ambitions to go to the Rio Olympics, one of whom managed to go through and compete for USA in the sevens competition in Rio, which was again a very satisfying moment on the female women's program, which is awesome. One of the best athletes from a diligence and professional habit standpoint that I've ever come across. So again, from my point of view as a coach, learning from athletes as much as me trying to impart a level of knowledge and a level of wisdom experience on them. Some of those people are teaching me about how to really prepare as properly and as effectively as possible. And there's a few other athletes of bygone years who've done exactly the same. But weird transition again. I mean, I'm bouncing back and forward, but I guess this is the roller coaster of sport and life. So that takes us to 2015, 2016. I and the family relocated back to the UK. Long story short, our youngest daughter was born in Seattle, and there was a little bit of kind of homesickness, I guess, from my wife's perspective. She wanted to spend time around her, her father, who's obviously then a now grandparent, and her sister and a few other people. So we went back to the UK. I worked in another sport, which is a completely polar opposite to rugby. I worked for a county cricket team, professional sport again. I guess cricket and baseball have a level of similarity, but the culture was the biggest shock for me in terms of rugby needing physical prowess, needing strength, needing power, needing size, to cricket, which is, as you know, with baseball, a very high skill sport. Someone's bowling a 5-ounce missile at you at potentially 90 miles an hour. The athleticism standpoint has exponentially developed over the last 5 or 6 years, but in terms of an athlete and a really, really high skilled athlete, a really high skilled player, that was the biggest challenge I think I had, that some of them were so good at their sport but didn't have the physical qualities to back that up. So the resiliency element was the bit that frustrated me, because some of them didn't see the connection between basically fitness and high quality physical output with the quality of their output as a player. Yeah. So it was that meshing of I guess it was storytelling for me in terms of getting the best out of them. But that was 2016, 2017, 18 and 19. I guess I transitioned out of sport a little bit. That cricket experience was fabulous. We did as a team win a very high profile tournament in the short format of the game. So it was one of those weird years where I had an amazing experience. I learned a lot myself as a coach, but also I was 200 days away from the family. It was a kind of challenging time from balancing the demands of sports coaching and obviously family life. So I sort of slid out of pro sport for 3 years and just touched on it with some semi-professional rugby consultancy work. But I worked at a university as a strength and conditioning lecturer for 3 years, and I've started a publishing career in terms of some of the academic side of strength and conditioning. But the scratch of coaching was so needing to be itched, shall we say, that I had a phone call during the summer of this year, 2019, from the previous employer at Adaptation, who said, how do you fancy coming back to Seattle to work with the Major League Rugby program? And it's obviously full-time professional, and that itch for coaching back in full-time sport kind of was
that an instant yes?
It didn't take very long. Yeah,
okay,
we had a phone call literally that was maybe 2 minutes long, and it was literally, are you interested? I'm checking. Yes. Okay, hang tight for the paperwork. And then we had a few conversations there and then. But Yeah, and now early 2020, I'm back in Seattle, loving the fact that Seattle Seawolves are current champions, and we've got some expectations in terms of taking the season forward and retaining the MLR League title, which is challenge number 1 for 2020.
Which will happen. We don't say if or maybe or hope.
No, all positive language, all positive language for sure.
But
that's the nutshell kind of 25 years in about 10 minutes.
Fantastic. But that's great though. I mean, honestly, because there's a couple of things there that I didn't know. So it's gonna lead me kind of down some rabbit holes. And with that said, so what I like to do is give the meat and potatoes per se, but like out of your career, when you look back, instead of going like, hey, what do you think now? Because I want to get to VBT, velocity-based training. I love that. And I know you got a ton of insights on that. But in general, when you look at training, and you look back at what you did and where you are now, and we could say athletes, but we could just talk people in general.
Sure.
What are some things that have been the big, like, man, I thought that like I should do that, but I definitely shouldn't. What are no-nos? Because I look at it this way. Let's not even talk about. I think we're both on the same page when we think, hey, somebody should get stronger, more powerful, more resilient, without jeopardizing them long term. It's not like, hey, let's make you the best in the next 4 years, but then you'll be fucking broken.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So from that standpoint, and just from the things that you've learned, what are some things that you did used to do, but you're like, man, those are definitely no-goes for me now, as far as your philosophy when it comes to training.
Yeah. Well, I guess, let's rewind a few years. So the 7 years in personal training was a slightly different entity when it comes to program prescription, program design, program delivery. You're kind of at the beck and call in the service industry of people who may or may not turn up. But the one fabulous thing about personal training is that they are paying for your time. So more often than not, they're going to show up and they're actually going to be diligent and they're going to be committed because they are paying for a service off somebody. So I think that particular population is a slightly different thing, but I think the biggest lesson that I've learned over the subsequent 15 years would be in terms of, and we've talked about this downstairs off air, is not being so prescriptive with the program design to the point where there's absolutely the rigidity and the lack of flexibility causes more problems than it solves. So I think that would be my biggest take home for any young coach listening and any coach who's just entering the industry. We're talking about stimulus. I mean, my little hashtag on Twitter is Strength Foundation, and I'm not saying that strength or maximum strength particularly is the underpinning physical quality that makes the difference in every sport. And I'm moving my kind of continuum along on the sort of the speed line as well as the strength line. And there is resiliency, and there's a whole load of stuff that we'll probably cover off at some point. But I think, that's the biggest, if I can give one sort of major take home from the 15 years of evolution that I've kind of made as a strength coach myself, would be, I don't make anybody squat anymore. I don't make anyone deadlift anymore. I don't make anyone clean anymore. There is a framework of exercises as modalities to develop the physical quality that you're trying to develop. Mm-hmm. So if maximum strength is the quality that you do want to develop, yes, it's great if you can hex bar deadlift pain-free, injury-free. It's great if you can squat pain-free to a good depth and you have the relevant, flexion issues, ankle mobility, whatever it may be that's going to impact on your ability to move competently with load with a particular exercise. But I think rugby particularly has helped me enormously, and to be honest with you, some of the players that I've also encountered have helped me enormously grow as a coach. And I've listened to players as much as I've told players what to do. And I think that's an important thing to sort of parallel as well when it comes to coaching. It's not a one-way street. It's got to be a democratic process.
I mean, there's a great book that I love. It's actually one of my top 3 recommendations when it comes to coaching, and it's universal. It could be business coaching, but it's coactive coaching, which is really learning how to be insightful, ask great questions, and find out a lot more. Because once again, hey, somebody does a deadlift and you see the face, like, how does that feel? I'm feeling that in the hip a little bit. Okay, cool. Let's switch it around a little bit. What about now? We lifted it on plates. Oh man, that feels so much better. You want to do that, or do you want to do this? Or I'll go with that today. Yeah. All right, great. Let's do a 3 or 3 on that. And I think that there's still too many people that feel like if they did that, it was wrong. And it's kind of we coach it in nutrition, right? It's like, hey, if you just do meal plans and give people very rigid stuff to do, they fall off and then they feel unsuccessful. Compliance is gone. But in strength training, it seems to have been this, no, that's what's on the plan, 75%, whatever, you know. And I think that's so crazy. And for a long time, I would feel guilty not doing the lift that it was in the program. You know, like, fuck it. I guess I'm just going to have a lesser session, you know, which is, and it happened last night. Like last night I started trap bar deadlifting. I'm like, it's not feeling the greatest, but let me put up on blocks, because it's that end range that's kind of, I'm feeling my hip a little bit. Put up on end range, had one of the best training sessions I had. Switched everything around, worked up to 500 for 2. You know, I mean, but the thing is, if I went, I have to lift this off the floor for this weight for this many reps. There's 2 things that would happen. I would have either tweaked something, or I would have just stopped and been like, fuck it, I'm done. Yeah. And that's crazy to me. And I think it's very parallel, right? I mean, athletes and or any person.
General pop, for sure. Yeah. I think, I mean, the reality for us, I think, as coaches, it's having, and not wanting to steal Dan Paff's thunder, but he's a phenomenal coach and someone with such huge level of experience and expertise. But have the plan written in pencil. And I think, again, learning lessons, one off athletes, two off your coaching philosophy evolving. I modify the program every single day. I work in a collision sport with athletes who run into each other, run fast, run often, like I say, collide with each other at up to 8 or 9 meters per second, shall we say. They're not always going to be in the right physical or mental condition after field practice, for example, to lift as prescriptively as maybe a paper program may suggest. Yeah. And I think you've got to evolve your program design so that you're chasing adaptation, and we can talk about VBT later on. And the method in which you chase the adaptation can move on a daily basis. Move on a daily basis. And I mean, going back to the sort of the big picture stuff here and the lessons learned. And again, I'll steal some thunder off a great mentor of mine called Ashley Jones, who ironically is a strength and conditioning coach who worked for the All Blacks and Australian Rugby Union, and now actually is going to lock horns with me for the first time professionally in the Major League Rugby, which is ironic. He's at the Sabercats in Houston. Oh, nice. So he's another guy who's kind of 6 to 8 years older than me, maybe 8 to 10. Unbelievably gifted at sharing information, and I'm hoping that one day you can, meet up with that guy too. I mean, shared so richly and generously with me in terms of information and time. It's what a mentor should be. But anyway, we're going to have to go up against each other professionally this year, which would be fun. But I think it's about this quadrant of management that he calls it, which is if you've got a very low training age and you are deemed the expert, and I'll say that the strength and conditioning coach in this case is the expert, who probably knows a little bit more than an 18-year-old or 16-year-old who's done no training in their whole life. There is a level of rigidity that is allowable, given that the athlete can move competently. That's a key point here. But if you just squat, bench, chin, follow the basics of programming 101, you will get results pretty quickly. And you can, because of the SAID principle and because of gas and all those, the physiological principles of strength and conditioning underpinning, you will be able to get great results out of people by being relatively prescriptive. I can tell you some stories about my kind of Cardiff Blues Academy career, particularly on that, which was clean, squat, single leg, push-pull, undulating periodization on a kind of Monday, Wednesday, Friday full body repetition scheme that just literally undulated through percentage-based prescription on a weekly basis with very little variation. And pretty Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and these guys turned out to be some of the most physically gifted athletes in Welsh rugby at the time. And I don't want to name drop, but I might just drop a few in there for just no. But it's good for people to know that. I'll tell you now, someone like Sam Warburton, who's just retired as British Lions and Welsh captain for kind of the last 5 or 6 years, was renowned as a physically gifted rugby player. Don't get me wrong, it was Sam's genes and Sam's diligence to training and Sam's diligence to nutrition that allowed him to become the player he was. Someone as fortunate as I was at the time to deliver to those kind of guys was an absolute privilege, because they would have turned into the athlete and player they turned into, irrespective of who was coaching them at the time. It just so happened to be me, and that's a nice thing. But I'd like to say, or I'd like to think that some of the program design was a contributory factor to their development, and it wasn't just one. There's N equals 25 or 30.
But because those guys were started young, right?
They started young and they were diligent and they listened to the advice. They had accountability to some degree. They had nutrition provision. They had a nutritionist who would take body comps. They'd have set targets. There'd be goal setting. There'd be integration of psychological strategy. There'd also be a high level of expectation set upon them from the management group that these are your targets for the next 6 weeks. Here's how we're going to get there. And there would be a little process. But if I'm being brutally honest, the actual program design was very, very basic, and it was very, very relatively rigid. There was a little bit of adaptation, obviously, when they played and they had to start doing a bit of manipulation. But, mate, they hang clean predominantly as their kind of Olympic lifting variation. They squatted 3 days a week, which I love the frequency to develop, obviously physically. Some of the guys put 10 kgs, 22 pounds on over the summer, which is a sort of 4-month preseason. But they were in that golden window of opportunity where the management group provided as much as possible to help those players develop. So guys who were small, I remember one player who's still playing at international level now for Wales. He came into our academy having been released from another academy for being too small. He was 74 kg, so I don't know what that is in pounds, but I'm a kind of kgs guy.
180.
So he was deemed too small. Yeah. Anyway, between him entering our academy at 74 kgs, he left our academy at 84 kgs not long after, and within the first year as a full-time professional, he went from making his debut for his club to making his debut for his international team, for making his debut for the British and Irish Lions, which is the pinnacle of rugby in Northern Hemisphere, in one season. And some of that was obviously based on physicality, but some of that was based on, again, another athlete who taught me so much about how to prepare with absolute professionalism. Unbelievable.
So, I mean, a couple things to unpack for sure is, I mean, look, if he was kicked out, let go because of being too small, and then went to another program.
He had 2 chips on his shoulder, and he still has fire in his belly, based off the fact that year, I think it was 2005, maybe 2006, he had the touch paper lit from under him, and he still is one of the most diligent professionals when it comes to preparing for elite level competition. And he's now, I think he's done 3 British and Irish Lions tours, which is pretty unheard of, and there's not many people who have a career longevity of that level at the highest possible level. It's like going to the Pro Bowl 10, 12 years in a row from a football standpoint. It is career longevity at the highest level, but some of the diligence in which he prepares is absolutely staggering, and you have to be respectful of that.
Absolutely. Now, so you got this quadrant 1, right?
Yes.
Quadrant.
Okay. Sorry. We got to go back.
But it's basics done exceptionally well. Frequency, I love, especially at that point in time. I love frequency.
Sure. Especially when size is an important element, and obviously developing strength quickly to match the demands of the game at the high level. So quadrant 1 is essentially the coach telling the player. Quadrant 2 then is the coach pretty much telling the player, but it's like, Luca, you want to develop maximum strength, you need to do lower body exercise. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to deadlift? Do you want a hex bar deadlift? Do you want to squat? Do you want to push a sled? Okay, I want to push a sled. Right. So if you want to develop maximum strength by pushing a sled, when I ask you to push a sled to develop maximum strength, load it heavy and push the bloody thing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't want to squat, that's absolutely fine. If you don't want to deadlift because you're a rugby player, you're not a deadlifter, you're not a powerlifter, you're a rugby player, I understand those demands. So that's the kind of conversation you then have at level 2, which is, the program is still the program, but you have some level of autonomy with exercise. Exercise selection now is a 2-way conversation. Yeah. It's not me telling you we're squatting today. It's me and you discussing what you want to fit into that program.
But I like what you said too. Like when we talked, downstairs, it was like strength stimulus versus, even like not even just saying a hinge pattern, right? You say squat, hinge, push, right? I mean, which is kind of locomotion, but the point of it is strength stimulus. And you go, here's your choices. You're an athlete. Bust your ass because we want these to be these parameters.
In this block, it's this. And it might be at the level I'm at now with athletes who are not 18 or 19. I know there's guys already in the group that I'm working with right now, in their 20s, late 20s, early 30s, who've played 10 years or 12 years as a professional rugby player. You think about the collisions, not only in training, but in obviously competition. Yeah. They may just push the sled for the rest of their career as their stimulus for developing maximum lower body strength. And I have absolutely no issue with that. I have no ego around, oh my God, your numbers on the key lifts in whatever else people are benchmarking. I don't care what people are benchmarking in other programs. It's not my problem. My problem is you on a weekend showing up and performing at your primary job, which is being a rugby player. And all of the stuff that physical preparation does is help you become the vehicle to showcase your talents on the weekend.
You know what? I really so I love this because when anybody that's listening to this, people can try to compartmentalize and say, oh well, Chris is talking about rugby. Yeah, but the thing is, I would go the same route and go like, okay, if your job is to show up as a mom that picks up 2 kids, goes and hikes on Sundays, right? How are we preparing her to do that, or whatever she wants to do? It's the same thing.
It's absolutely transferable. I did the same. My philosophy, bearing in mind I'd worked in professional rugby for, call it 12 years before I got into professional cricket, where they didn't. My development sort of theory and my development process was the same for the cricket player. It's a slightly different challenge because the competition season is it's about like baseball. You're playing all the time, but you can microdose the physical qualities that you want to develop. So guys sprinted every week, guys lifted every week, and I didn't care if it was lifted for 20 minutes.
It's great.
It's a lift. It's a lift, and it's a stimulus to help you maintain your resilience and performance qualities, not the other way around. Are you with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
But also I think the big thing to sort of mention here possibly is young coaches are maybe less secure about themselves than, say, someone of my age who's just upwards of 40, just upwards.
Barely scratching
40. But you become slightly more also immersed in big picture thinking as opposed to minutia. So when I was 25, and I have this, I'll share some examples of kind of talking to young coaches about their program design, where they are where I was 25 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever, where they're so immersed in the minutiae of their program and the exercise order and the exercise selection. And it's kind of like they spend hours in front of the Excel spreadsheet getting their programming exactly how they want it to look. Sets, reps, intensities, percentage based if they want to go down that road, which I obviously can blow out of the water pretty comfortably and quite easily without being too facetious. Yeah. But the sets, the reps, the time that they have to the tempo, the rest periods, whatever. The spreadsheet looks amazing, but they're not big picture thinkers. For me, I'm one of the 4 pillars of performance. There's tactical, there's technical, there's psychological, there's physical. And if the other 3 coactives are working as efficiently as possible, I'm a support mechanism for a player. Physical preparedness is not the event. And I learned this from a lot of rugby players, actually, of relatively high quality, especially overseas players who came into the Cardiff Blues, who challenged the conventional way of doing things, which I loved and I learned a lot from, and I'll maybe share some of that with you down the line. But it's one of those things where we're just one of the factors. And a lot of coaches, I think, young coaches, especially in my experience, they're so worried about the squat numbers going up, the speed numbers going up, the body fat scores going down, the jump scores going up, whatever it might be, every physical performance metric that's proving that you're worthy of your job. Versus for me, I'm maybe take a slightly different mentality now, whereby if you show up on Saturday, everything I've done with you in the week before the games arrived, which might be giving them nudges on nutrition, pushing them towards the nutritionist to help with that, something around that, pushing them towards the psych, having a conversation with them around performance, but not necessarily the delivery of that performance mechanism. I'm actually getting to a point where I've actually done a better job by doing less and not doing more. But the young strength coach is like, no, you've got to do your 5x5. You've got to do your, it says 5 sets of 2 clean at 85%. You've got. It's like, no, you don't. You modify and manage the program, and you have a flexibility within your program design to either bolt on some top-ups or take off some work based on some of your performance metrics and some of your conversations and some of your profiling and some of your, your load management strategy, whatever it may be. But that's coaching. It's dynamic. It's a continual moving kind of animal.
I look at it as an organism.
Yeah, it's
right?
moving.
Because it's like,
and it's adapting.
The organism's always changing, and when you put sport into play, and I'll just say, for I would say a non-athlete, I just call them the athlete of life, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's still right, but what's the organism can be lack of sleep and stress at work and this and that, and in sport you have the technical aspect, and you got hit, right? So now your nervous system's wacky, you're in your head. This is all, there's so many factors that to think that you could write a program and stick to it in a nice linear or undulating fashion. It's actually kind of nuts to believe
Correct.
that, right?
Correct. And I'm so pleased that the new periodization methodologies are really challenging stress as a larger entity. Home stress, kids, financial, nutritional,
like your own personal mental stress that you're always thinking about.
Tons and tons. Yeah. It's not, and this is again where these young coaches are so stressed about getting their programming so right on paper. But it's like, that's not the only stress an athlete's going through. Mm-hmm. Commuting in Seattle is a stress. Getting the right nutrition or not the right nutrition is a stress. Being hydrated to the right point is a stress. Like you say, getting 6 hours sleep instead of 8 hours sleep is a stress. And all of these things, these 100, these 200, these 300 moving parts go into performance on Saturday. And I think that's where you think a little bit more broadly as a sort of more experienced and say older coach. Like I say, I'm happy to take the guys I think that I'm coaching at the moment are enjoying the fact that I don't have a high volume methodology and a high volume mentality. I understand that they're rugby players first and foremost, and everything I deliver is based around them being in the best possible shape to showcase that. And even if that means, I do less, because they don't need a huge amount of stimulus. If you scrummage in practice, the lower body's been torched for half of our squad. They don't need the volume that maybe a non-player would not. Like you say, your everyday athlete. Yeah. They might be they've done nothing all day. Yeah. Whereas our guys have come from a field practice where they've scrummaged, which essentially is doing a lower body workout, and then they come in the gym and have to do another lower body workout. That lower body workout doesn't need to be 90 minutes long. It will crush them. Yeah. And obviously that's where that, like I say, that kind of philosophy comes into play as well. I'm sure you've seen all the stuff around minimum effective dose and all that sort of stuff. It's slightly more complex than that, as we both know. Absolutely. But the reality is, do they need to do 5 sets of a key lift? Probably not. Do they need to give me 3 really good quality outputs? Yes, they probably do. And that's where, again, and I know we'll segue to it at some point, the VBT stuff's great because you can get them in a sweet spot and you can give them the dose that they need for the physical quality you want to develop at that particular time. If I want to develop maximum strength, I want to see a certain number shown on my my dashboard, whatever it might be. If I want to develop strength speed, I can get the loading parameters bang on, because between this velocity zone and this velocity zone, that is the kind of loading scheme that you need to develop explosive strength or strength speed, whatever you want to term it.
Yeah, so, I actually want to move into that. Before I do, just like an example from my personal life of, for instance, right? I mean, I work a lot. I train quite a bit, but I've taken out as much, I still do boxing throughout the week. I don't play. I'm trying to get back to playing basketball. But an example would be is that I can have a much, more volume in a lift than if I add something. So I've started adding more sprints and jumps and things like that. And as soon as I started adding that, it's not even the volume of my lifts. I'm like, all right, I'm done, right? I mean, I have to chop it down and cut it out. So if you take, a person that, I don't know, they play basketball twice a week, and they're, like they're a weekend warrior, right? They do basketball league twice a week. Well, you're going to write a different program for that person and manage it differently than somebody that does absolutely nothing. Sure. Right? And then you take an athlete and you guys are practicing on the field, right now, 4 days a week? 4 days a week. Man, and you're cutting and stopping and jumping. And I mean, it's, try to go and lift super heavy after, 30 minutes of doing some shadow, agility work with somebody. Sure. Like, you're not going to be able to do what you did before. So, keeping those, and once you start looking at that, you go like, shit, there is a ton of different inputs that we got to look at. Now, leading into, I mean, I've done a good chunk of velocity-based training in my life, but like, man, you are like really, I would say, working with that right now. And imagine you're explaining this to like an 8 to 10-year-old. Because I think coaching is actually like I try to do that as much as possible. Sure. But VBT, velocity-based training, how it operates. I mean, obviously, you're looking at there's different apps. You use the push app, which is super simple and great. On when you try to get a certain outcome out of training, obviously this is bar speed. Just break that down a little bit. Whether it's strength stimulus, speed stimulus. If same thing. If you're looking at, for instance, volume and hypertrophy, how are you looking at that when it comes to?
Wow. Yeah. Okay. This is a big topic area, especially with all those three. I'll try and do my best. Yeah, I guess so. As a caveat, I think my first exposure. So I guess it's the storytelling of my roller
Yeah,
coaster
because I would like to know actually.
Yeah.
What made you go? Oh, I love this.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So again, you've got to rewind back to 2002, 2003. So I guess the fortune for me personally as a developing coach was that Leicester Tigers were very closely aligned with England Rugby at the time. So England Rugby at the time were, foresaw the future and provided the club with linear position transducers. I can't remember whether it was a GymAware or whether it was a Tendo unit, but it was the tethered version of the new school velocity-based training device.
It still had the little cable.
Yeah, they had the cable that you attached to the bar. One of the frustrations back then was if guys, especially if they did something like an Olympic lift, the bounce and the vibration, that tether used to break quite often, and then they almost replaced it with a sort of very, very strong kind of fishing wire that was much more successful in terms of that tether being kind of always attached, so you got the readings that you wanted. But I guess to answer your question, from there I kind of got into the efficiency and effectiveness kind of conundrum and the puzzle piece and the solution building from there, whereby a couple of England players got injured and spent pretty much, I can't remember what one of them did, maybe a shoulder, but he could safety squat bar, for example. So we started messing around with some velocity-based training in terms of developing his maximum strength for lower body. And it was trial and error for me then. There was no kind of education courses. It was kind of, you get in there and you go, right, what are we looking for? Well, in order to develop maximum strength, we need the bar speed to be at a certain number. So that number potentially for lower body is 0.5 meters per second and lower. So yeah, surprise, surprise, guess what? The heavier the weight, the slower the bar moves. But that's kind of an obvious kind of connection to make. But then, and this is how that whole strength foundation hashtag kind of evolved as well. It was about not only developing maximum strength, but also developing the other strength qualities. So developing speed strength, developing strength speed. But also I think the reason why I really enjoyed velocity-based training as I evolved to use it much more often was that actually you can buffer and use it as a protection mechanism to help athletes. So in context, I'll sort of try and frame this. Some athletes love lifting heavy all the time, and they love grinding, and they love going to technical failure often.
Yep.
And it's actually, in the long term, talking about stress response and adaptation, crushing your central nervous system 3 or 4 days a week is not helpful to develop you as an explosive athlete who's got to do multiple repeated power efforts on the weekend, plus run, plus collide, plus all the other, plus execute technical skills, etc., etc. So I guess I went into this thinking, right, how can I essentially give an athlete the best possible training experience today, which impacts on the next training experience, which will be another weight training session in between 2 and 3 days, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So I guess the reason why I really like VBT is because you can couple training units together to make forward progress pretty much all of the time. And what I mean by that is if a squat has a minimum velocity threshold, and we can talk technicalities of VBT forever, but the minimum velocity threshold is essentially you're going to fail. That is your fail speed. So if you can squat at 0.3 meters per second for a 1 rep max, that's probably close to a true 1 rep max for someone who could, in theory, squat about 200 kgs. The heavy squatters can normally squat a little bit slower and still maintain good form and finish a rep, but it's probably no more than 0.23, 0.24 meters per second. So it's, the minutiae.
Not that much, but those are the best in the world.
Yeah, being pedantic, it's not a massive amount, but I mean, if you're as a coach, you need to have your eye on 0.3 meters per second. If you finish a rep at 0.3 meters per second, trust me, you're not going to do the next one. You are not going to do the next, and that knowing those numbers is important. Because, for example, if I can say to someone, right, I want to give me an honest set of three, or give me an honest 5. I know that rep number 5 in a squat, for example, at about 0.4 meters per second is a good, honest effort because they've probably got one more rep left in the tank.
But you might be like, that's it.
Yeah, and I'm done. So if they finish that last rep of 5 of that set of 5 at 0.6 meters per second, I know based on their final rep that weight is too light. They can go up. So in that respect, with a bit of coaching eye and also a lot of exposure to the technology over the last 15 or so years, you can, as a coach, prescribe to an athlete pretty much from seeing their warm-up sets where they can go on any given day, given their physiology for any given day. So you and I both know Brian Mann pretty well. Brian's done some fantastic work in this field,
yep.
and now much more research has been done in this area as well by some pretty cool practitioners. But also, Brian, from some of his work, and obviously knowing about periodization and the sort of methodologies and theories of today, human physiology is not linear. We both know you can't just go 75% of 1 rep max today, 80 the next day, 78 the next day, 83 the next day. That undulating periodization model is gone. Human physiology is far too complex for that. So what the VBT allows me to do is it allows me to prescribe load in the right speed zone to elicit the stimulus that I'm after. So it might be that today you feel great and you're going to give me 4 sets of 3 on the hex bar dead at 4:05. You're going to finish at about 0.45 meters per second. It's heavy, but it's not near minimum velocity threshold. But what that does is it allows me, like I say, for you to not overstretch yourself to the point where you're going to not be able to recover for the next stimulus that I've got planned for you in 3 days' time. So it allows for forward progress all the time, like I say. But also, those guys who really like lifting heavy, that is heavy. 0.45 final rep of a 4 set of 3, or 3 sets of 4, 4 sets of 3, whatever it may be, is heavy. Mm-hmm. But it's not heavy to the point where they then can't do any accessory work, they can't do anything else, and they're battered for the next 3 days. Because they can't do their field practice, which is also very important as a sports coach.
I love this because essentially what it's giving you actual. If you just didn't look at the bar at all, mm-hmm. you'd go, okay, we got you where we want you to.
Yeah.
And then the player could go, oh well, shit, this is 20% less than what I was doing last week.
Yes.
Who cares? Doesn't matter.
That's absolutely fine. And I was going to go on to that, and I was going to say, so this is the challenge we've now got. So I know based on this week's data that you showed some of that on social media, very kind of you. But just say a guy did lift 180 for 5 this week. We're now going to play a fairly challenging exhibition game on Sunday. So they're going to come into next week, relatively speaking, under-recovered because we have 1 less recovery day than we had the week before. So Tuesday, 4:05 may feel absolutely horrendous, but I'll know that before they even lift 4:05 because in their preparation sets, when just say they've got 100 kilos on the bar, so 225, if they're not moving that at about 1 meter per second, I know that they're not ready to go to where they went last week. But like you just suggested, I can still prescribe a load, even if it's 160 this week, whatever that is in pounds. Sorry, I'm bouncing between pounds and kilos. It's one of those things that British people will do. Like you've suggested, you've not lifted as heavy this week as you did last week because of other factors, i.e. you've just played a very challenging rugby match where there's all those other physical attributes that have been stressed. But I'm still giving you the stimulus that you need to develop the strength quality. So whether you've lifted 180, 160, 200... in the right velocity zone, you're developing the right physical capacity. And that's where it's beautiful because you go, well, if you only play 20 minutes of the weekend, you might have a go day. And if you have a go day, get after it. But you can still get after it within that range and within that buffer zone.
Yeah, but the number's just going to change.
Yeah,
because
and
it
you're
depends,
getting, and that's one thing that's the education piece for the athlete.
Yeah.
And the same goes for when you're trying to develop strength, speed, and speed strength. Everyone wants to try to lift at the heavy end. But I want velocity this week. So I want you to lift at 1.5 meters per second. If you're lifting at 1 meter per second, the weight's too heavy. I take some weight off. I want you to lift at 1.5. Boom. Here's the intent. One of the great things about velocity-based training is not just about what it's telling me as a coach and what obviously I'm prescribing to the athlete. It's also eliciting that training intent from an athlete's perspective. It's eliciting competition. And as you know, as I know, what's so-and-so lifting? Okay, so everyone's lifting 100 kilos. Or everyone's lifting 50 kilos. And all the alpha males want to lift the fastest. So then if you want to lift the fastest, you show intent. If you show intent, you get athlete output. If you get athlete output, you get athlete results. So the reality of the thing is it's not just the objective marker that you're seeing, which is helping you prescribe effectively. It's also, as a coach, getting your athletes fired up, getting them competitive, getting the intent that you want in the gym, because let's face it, we all know they're rugby players or sports players first and foremost. Some days the gym is not their friend. It's not they didn't get into their sport to come to the gym. The gym now helps them perform and helps them become more resilient. So sometimes you've got to play games with players, haven't you? And objective data and objective markers help athletes give you effort. And if they give you effort, you'll ultimately get them to get results. And that's a key puzzle piece for me when it comes to VBT. Yeah. Not just, I want you to lift fast. So if I want you to lift fast, you've got to lift light stuff. If I want you to lift heavy stuff within this continuum, within these boundaries. And I will make sure as a coach that I kind of safeguard them from technical failure and trashing their central nervous system. And as we both know with some of the other guys that you kind of speak to frequently, we want them healthy. We want them performing at a high level. We want them resilient. That's the kind of pillars of S&C or performance preparation. So it's just some of the guidelines for me.
Some great insights. The thing is too, like me looking at that, for instance, you'd get me to lift with more intent. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a natural thing. I did what, and you want me where? Fuck.
Yeah.
That's all of a sudden, right. Like I'm pushing through harder and getting that velocity up.
Elite athletes, mate, they're competitive. There's absolutely no doubt, and they are. If position by position, you and me are fighting for the starting spot. What do you move 100 kilos at? Oh yeah, 1.4, 1.3, 1.2,
Yeah.
And and it might be that you've got to protect them from themselves as well.
Yeah.
And you say, hold on a minute, just face facts. Joe's got more fast twitch than you.
Yeah.
Suck it up, boy.
Yeah.
And there's the forwards are the workhorses, the slower twitch animals, the backs are the Ferraris, and that's fine. And ultimately, you can also then differentiate your program prescription based off the needs. These guys need more strength. These guys need more strength speed. These guys need more speed strength. Whatever it may be, you can actually be a bit more diagnostic as well, and actually give athletes more of what they need. And there's a nice mixed methodology around that as well for me.
And you can use it for anything too. I mean, because like an example, I like the high, medium, very high, low if I'm going through 4 weeks.
Yep.
But based on that, you could go again. You could say, hey, listen, like this is high. This is what we want. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know you could move it faster, but it's a medium week. Mm-hmm. So here's basically the velocity I'm looking from you, right? Like you can really adapt it to a lot of different
Absolutely.
stuff.
Oh, very adaptable. Very. I mean, yeah. I'm not saying it's one technology that helps us make better decisions as coaches. I mean, if you work in professional sport, I mean, we are in technically a startup professional sport in the US. It's obviously a much more developed professional sport in other countries, but I haven't got all the technology in the current program that I used to have in other professional programs, and that's absolutely fine. But you've got jump match, you've got speed gates, you've got GPS units, you've got VBT, you've got all sorts of other. There's tons of technology that help you make decisions. It's not the only thing that's going to be the difference between you playing well on weekend and not, and we both know that, having had these 300 or 400 moving parts that go into performance on the weekend. But it's just helping us give the athlete the best possible opportunity to develop the physical qualities they need to do well in their sport on the weekend or in the coming weeks of a competition phase or whatever it might be.
Now, how would you approach with athletes, obviously you need this too, whether it's off season or you were just explaining earlier, right? We have to put muscle on somebody. Mm-hmm. Does VBT even come into play when it comes to, for instance, like hypertrophy and building muscle and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you came back to that. But yeah, so in terms of the interface that Push has, and obviously other VBT devices do exist as well. Yeah. There's an interface whereby you can actually program off velocity loss, and velocity loss is a very effective way of prescribing load and prescribing sets and reps that do the job really, really effectively. So, for example, for the lower body, and again, it's about choosing your poison and choosing your activity carefully, bearing in mind that hypertrophy is a different animal when it comes to technical failure and time under tension and all those other things. But if you, for example, on a squat, prescribe 40% velocity drop off, so you're literally working with a set load until 40% drop off with the kind of same rest periods that you would traditionally prescribe for a developing hypertrophy, you are going to get, ironically, about the same number of reps as a kind of traditional 3 sets of 8 to 12. Mm-hmm. But what tends to happen is that if you've got that really good prescriptive eye in terms of that initial load that an athlete's going to work off, I did it with a couple of guys in the UK with bodybuilders who really interested in the velocity loss and obviously the muscle hypertrophy element, and we did 3 sets of bench press starting at about 0.7 meters per second. So that's telling me there's about 8 to 10 reps left in the tank. Anyway, that's some of the technicalities around VBT, but we basically said just do 3 sets, work till you've literally dropped to 40% of your initial, your first rep. So I think the first set, the guy might have done 12 to 15. I can't remember exactly the number. Call it 15. You gave him a minute's rest. You then go, okay, go again. And I think he ended up getting 6 or 7. And then his third set, bearing in mind most of us traditionally would go, 3 sets of 8 to 12 or 3 sets of 10 to 12, whatever it might be in the rep scheme for developing hypertrophy. Yeah. I think he got 4 or 5 reps out before he could drop below 40% of his first reps best. So what has he done? 15 plus 8, 6 or 7, and then plus 4. So he's only done about 20 odd reps. And he texted me the day after we'd done this workshop, and he said, "Oh my God, my chest is in absolute pieces." And so in terms of effectiveness and muscle damage and obviously the things that you want to elicit in terms of breakdown, the 40% drop off is a e-bench, but there's the squat, the bench, the pull-up, whatever it might be. It's effective to answer
I think what we're going to do partially too is I'm going to go on like a 12-week complete VBT program and just get jacked out of my mind and start dunking on people.
Yeah, hey,
I'll give you all the credit.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I know. I'm serious. I'm like, you know me. I've spent like a quarter century testing, training on myself, and then others, obviously, some guinea pigs. But it's actually shit. Theo put on when he first came here about a year and a half. What did you put on? 50 pounds of muscle. Yeah. I mean, I got a picture that will blow your mind, like
Great.
Just straight off.
But that's it. But this is what the training environment for us, and again, I think it's an important point from a slightly aging strength and conditioning coach. We have to have the ability to practically apply things. Mm-hmm. It's great, and you and I both talked about this off air before. The theory of training is not the same as the practical application of training.
Sometimes it's so far apart.
Of course, and absolutely. And these things, like you say, the training 25 people at a time is so different to training small groups, training so much different to training in a private one-on-one scenario. Mm-hmm. And reading about training and doing and feeling how these things feel is absolutely imperative as a coach. And like you say, how can you prescribe 4 sets of bench press with 40% velocity drop off, or 4 sets of squat, or 4 sets of hex bar dead, whatever the exercise may be, without actually knowing how that feels yourself? I'm sure you've done every repeated sprint protocol you've ever delivered. I'm sure you've done every horrendous aerobic capacity test, whatever it might be. Because how are you going to effectively prescribe to people? I know it's only N=1 in terms of your own individual physiology, but if I'm going to push athletes really hard, I've got to know how they're potentially going to feel from that particular session that I've delivered to those guys. And that goes with whether it's strength and power, whether it's speed, whether it's endurance capacity, whatever it may be, especially in the sport that I work in. It's pretty broad spectrum in terms of what you're asking an athlete to do. And it's also how those things all couple together, which again winds back to VBT, where if someone has had a horrendous field practice, you have to pull back in the gym. And it's a bit like your good friend and mine, Eric Cressy. If you add something somewhere in the program, somewhere else in the program, you've got to take something away. The bucket has only got a finite amount of filling. You cannot overfill the bucket. And so if like you suggested, if you sprint more, we've got to take some more, we've got to take something out. We've got to add more recovery. We've got to add more mobility. We've got to add less training of strength or power or aerobic, whatever it might be. Something at some point has got to go because the bucket has a finite filling capacity.
And we don't, the thing is, in the real world, there's really no, we don't do overreaching stuff anymore. I mean, you know what I mean? Like sure. It's the life keeps going. Athletes keep going. Yeah. It's a phase. And I think that's for actually there's.
Oh yeah, we don't work in sports where that the Olympic final is on August the 20th. We play next week, then we play the week after. We play the week. We are rolling the dice every single time we go on the field as a rugby player because there's a 1 in 3 or 1 in 8 chance of getting injured. You roll the dice.
Yeah.
So like you say, we can't plan for 6 weeks ahead. And I told you this story about the programming I'd done, and this goes back to the sort of. I know we just bounce in between.
That's all good. That's good. This is how it's supposed to be.
It's a bit more organic, exactly. But it's like writing a 6-week program for someone, and then on Sunday, for example, they break their arm. Well, your awesome, amazing 6-week spreadsheet program goes out the window. Goes out the window. And so, like I said to you again earlier, you have to have a framework. You have to have a plan. I mean, periodization, planning, whatever you want to define it as, it doesn't matter to me. I have a phase plan in January. I have a phase plan in February. I have a phase plan in March. I also have 30 guys who are going to need slightly different things on any given day. And I haven't got the capacity from a computational point of view to even write 30 individual
Yeah,
programs
it's
on my
impossible.
spreadsheet because I've only got 160 hours in the week. And
Yeah.
trust me, with an old man like me, I need at least 60 of those to sleep. so that leaves me 100 hours. And then I've got to commute in Seattle. That leaves me that's an hour each way because the traffic's horrendous. But, I'm telling a bullshit story. But you have the phase plans and you have a structure, but that structure is very, very fluid.
Has to be melted.
And I think, and this does apply to high school kids. This
I
does
think it
apply
applies
to
to
college
everything.
kids. This does apply to the housewife who's taking their kids to school and hiking at the weekend, like you suggest. The pickup basketballer. Planning is just it's just a fluid continuum.
There's like as you were saying, there's a bunch of people things popped up. Because I want to move to another question because I think you might have. There's a box 3, right? We were talking about phase 1, box 1, like more.
The quadrant of management.
Quadrant, the quadrants.
Sure. We haven't got to 3 and 4 yet.
There we go. So we're gonna get there.
There's four. Thanks, Ash Jones, for that. By the way, he's very helpful.
We're gonna get there. But I want to say, like you said something like, hey, you have to understand how these things feel. I have a big and we do some online coaching now. And we're maybe moving into that even some more in 2020. But me personally, like I could never not coach, and I have a big beef with people that haven't really coached for a really long time coaching online. Because in real life you actually get to see what's actually happening when you go through it, when you work with people skin to skin. You start getting, even if you've been coaching for 5 years, I don't think that's that. Like, it's a good, decent amount, but it's not really, a crazy amount of time.
You've heard of the Kruger-Dunning curve, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Well,
yeah,
of course you have.
yeah.
I'm talking to the listener.
Yeah.
There's guys that are way more experienced than me who claim to know nothing, and I think we're humble. We're humble enough to accept that when you're 25, and this goes back full circle to the learnings of 15, 20 years of working in professional sport. When I was 25 or maybe 30, because I did start a little bit late in my pro sport career. That program I delivered to you was the best thing ever. Yeah. But it's evolved. I mean, what that looks like, and I will do a presentation at some point, and hopefully we'll talk about this another time as well. The evolution of the strength coach from this to where it is now. I mean, I don't even know how long it would take, and I don't want to do a 300, page slideshow, but it's just mind-blowing. But there are a lot of people on that left-hand side of that curve who are so overconfident that their way is just the only way. And it's just, you have to open your mind. You have to be curious. You have to be, emotionally intelligent enough to think, actually, and like I say, me hanging out with other coaches who are way, way more experienced and have higher levels of wisdom. Like I say, the Dan Paff experience for me when I travelled to Altis was mind-blowing to the point where I was embarrassed that I know so little. It's like, I'm chasing learning on a daily basis.
I agree.
And it's quite scary how little we know when you actually open your mind to the whole kind of subject area that we're focused on in terms of human performance and maximizing it and mastery of certain things, and then just seeing the physical capacities being expressed by other people. It is mind-blowing. But going back, it's like people have got such high levels of confidence that that's the only way. And for me, like I say, you've got to be confident in yourself to suggest that there's still so much learning to do things more optimally. It's actually one of my find the answer.
It's one of the reasons why I love to continue to learn. I mean, I'm just naturally curious. I feel very dumb. I know I'm really good at what I do, but I feel dumb. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like this dichotomy, and you meet somebody like Dan, or I've studied a lot of his stuff, and actually going through the course right now. My brother went out for 9 days to intern at Altis. And he loved it. And same thing.
I was only there a week. It blew my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, basically, and it was exactly that. It's like, and Dan's been coaching hands-on for how long?
Yeah,
I mean,
50 years. 7, I think 10, at least 10 Olympics, which is incredible. So that's 40 years. It goes back to your question though about the coaching and the hands-on and the beef, and I totally agree. And it's one of those things again in terms of lessons learned when I'm watching and I am mentoring young coaches, and I have mentored a few who've turned out to be pretty good and actually accelerating their development through listening and learning, which is awesome. But it's like you're seeing someone squat, and you ask them, what do you see? And they don't see what you see. And this goes back to the Dan Paff analogy. Dan can see 3 guys on the start line of the Olympics all take 3 steps and share the movement dysfunctions of high-level elite athletes in with the naked eye, within 3 to 5 steps, and you're like, oh my god, and that's where you feel so limitless with, oh my god, I've got so much more to learn.
Oh yeah.
But then I think you're alluding to the fact that online stuff is great to share your thinking and your programming and your philosophy, but I don't think the human-to-human interaction will ever get superseded by any digitizing of your thinking and your philosophy around programming and coaching. I
mean, something happened yesterday. One of our coaches said, "Hey, can you come look at this squat?" And a guy that's had a fused ankle.
Yeah. I saw you working. I saw you working. I'm looking. I'm observing.
And the thing is, I can't even, when I'm looking at it, at first, I don't even know what I'm looking at. You know what I mean? Like I've just seen so much of it. I'm like, do this. Hold on. Get rid of the bar. When you do that, what do you feel? Take the kettlebell, push it out. What about now? Take that stance, put the toe out. Does that feel fine? Yeah, that feels fine. Okay. So you have FAI, which you do. Try this. You know what? I think you should put him on a 4-week isometric program. To be able to like own this position, because he's got a pattern that's 100,000 reps in one direction. He's not dysfunctional. He just has a dysfunctional pattern, right? And it's like 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. It's like go, but but then like I said, like if you gave me a sprinter and said what's going on, and I'd see some things like, and Dan would be like, here's the matrix, and you're like,
I was going to say, but I'd need to take the video and watch it 25 times, 30 times, 40 times.
And then even when he told you,
he's looked and seen something and there's other guys in that program, and there's other sprint coaches. There's a guy in the UK who's getting a reputation. There's a guy down in San Diego who's getting a reputation. Like, I follow the sprint guys because it's interesting, because obviously I work in a multi-sprint sport, but it's just, again, there's only a finite amount of time in the day. I know you work long hours and you study hard. There are only a certain amount of hours a day where you can literally compartmentalize yourself away to go, right, I want to focus on this for now.
Yeah.
And like I said, the challenge in rugby, which is a fascinating challenge and one that really excites me, is the fact that you work across the full spectrum of physical qualities. You need endurance, you need speed, you need power, you need explosive, repeatability, you need X, Y, Z. And programming for that, it is all these puzzle pieces fitting together, and it's that conjugated, vertically integrated thing. And it's about, right, what does he need? Okay, well, he needs that, but he needs that, and he needs that, and you're like, oh my god, there's so many individual needs within the constraints of your time frame. You've only got the guys for 5 hours a day, and that includes recovery, and that includes video analysis, and that includes all these other things. And you just think there isn't enough time in the day to get everything done. But what are the big rocks? And then you go into that whole kind of, again, mentality around, okay, well, what are the big rocks? Well, in order to physically dominate, you have to be strong and powerful. The sub-elite get differentiated by the elite through speed and essentially force application. So, but then if you can't catch and pass, you're no good at the sport. So he's got so many things pulling on each other, and you're like, oh my god. But you have just at some point got to decide what is most important. Yeah. And ultimately, I think also going back to your point about coaching and face-to-face time, it is about, I know it's the sort of Brett Bartholomew domain, which is the relationships, knowing the athlete, listening to the athlete. Massive, massive lesson learned from me, and it turned the corner for me from a programming perspective, was being challenged by coaches, being challenged by athletes who were elite at their sport in my professional rugby career. And those things go back to what you're saying about the quadrants of management.
Yeah, because I said that's going to lead to 3.
So we're getting to 3. We're getting to 3.
Look at that transition.
I know, mate. This is no script or anything. There's no auto cue. It's all good. But quadrant 3 is literally the player, and this is where I'm reading a lot of stuff at the moment on the sports psychology. And there's a great coach called Paddy Upton, who's a South African who works in cricket. Anyway, and he's absolutely right. He suggests that the sort of intellectual property of a team, the most valuable intellectual property of a team, is, especially elite teams, is the players themselves. And this again is where you learn as a coach to listen and to take as much from a player as they can take from you as a coach. And the quadrant 3 for me is basically the player has 75% autonomy on what they need to do. And there's a very famous rugby player, he played for the All Blacks, he played for some New Zealand teams, and then he came to Cardiff Blues and had an illustrious career. His name's Xavier Rush. One of life's characters, and I'll tell some stories off air about Xavier because it's probably not for a family show. But no, he's a great bloke, really great bloke. But again, he fitted into quadrant 3, which was essentially he knew what he needed to perform well on the weekends. And week in, week out, for about 5 or 6 years at the Cardiff Blues, he was a dominant factor. He was one of the most ferocious ball carriers in the league and got a reputation for literally running over people, and was extremely powerful. Never squatted, never deadlifted, and this goes back to lessons learned about program design and stimulus. His only stimulus for about 2 or 3 years from a what we would consider conventional strength and conditioning standpoint was heavy sled towing. And bearing in mind, most people in the literature...
Pushing, pulling.
Towing a sled. Towing a sled. So what most people would suggest back in the literature, you can't sled tow with 100 kgs because it wrecks your sprinting mechanics, But if you think about how strong you are around the hips, if you can tow 100 kgs or more, and over 5 or 10 meters, we're not talking about massive distances, that acceleration distance.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was the number one most effective way of developing, 1, his acceleration, and 2, his power and acceleration. And like I say, he used to run people over, literally run 100-kilo men over for fun. And he was the most... But he was a guy who would challenge my program design all the time, in a nice way, in a positive way. Yeah. And I won't lie to you, we had a fair few debates on where we should go with his programming. And ultimately, he was one of the alpha males in the environment. And I won't say he got his own way, but he made me think differently about programming. And that's how, like I said, my program prescription has evolved enormously. And that's from applying it to cricket and rugby and any other environmental area that I'd go into in the future potentially. But that's basically quadrant 3, where the player of elite level knows how to get ready for Saturday. But the challenge we have as coaches is not only getting them ready for Saturday, but getting them ready for the following Saturday, the following Saturday, the following Saturday. So that's where our kind of more, I guess our wiser, levels of expertise help add the little bits of microdose that help you continually perform at a high level, versus sometimes you have to protect them from themselves. Do you need to do 10 reps of that? 4 to 6 will probably do the job. So you're kind of, again, slicing a little bit of volume out, even though they're doing something a little bit different.
It's basically, it's like from quadrant 2 to 3, what happens is that it's coactive coaching, but I would say more of the kind of the guidance falls on the line of the player versus the other way around. It just shifts to that quadrant.
And it went back to, and then other players fell into that same category for me, where if you're a high-level international player with, let's say, anywhere between 25 and 100, when I was lucky to work with players who had 100 test caps, which is a pretty huge milestone in performance in professional rugby. If you've got between 25 and 100 test caps for your country, I think you pretty much know how to prepare to play rugby at the highest level. And we are just facilitating the help. We're pointing you in the direction, like I say, of the nutritionist. Is your body comp optimal? Can you recover better? Do you need a massage more often? Which areas are tight? Maintenance. You're the mechanic. You're the mechanic, and you're dosing them with a stimulus that they need, but they're pretty much deciding what they want to do on a day-to-day basis, and you're managing that. You're not being bent over, but you're also having a very, very proactive discussion, and you are, like I say, listening as opposed to talking. And I think that's massively important. And those were the biggest lessons I learned in performance sport and coaching, that sometimes the player, and we're not talking about high school and collegiate players, because I don't think they have the capacity to, and they're not without being too horrendous, they're not elite level. Yeah. People say they're elite level, but no, elite level is the All Blacks' best 5 players of all time. That's the truly elite level. Rafa Nadal is elite. Yeah. Roger Federer is elite.
LeBron James is elite.
Yeah. The upper echelon, they are the elite. And I know people liberally spread, elite youth. There's no such thing as elite youth, sorry. Yeah. They're youth. They're 18. Chances of them making it to the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, whatever other major league is slim. There's no elite level sport until you are at the upper echelon of a professional sport. Like you say, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, etc., whoever the guys are today, I'm not quite sure. I'm not a baller, but you know, I can tell you the rugby lads, and that's the level that most of the guys who I've seen do exceptionally well have aspired to be elite level, not just be good level professionals. And that's the sort of, it's the integration of all these moving parts, isn't it? And it's also living the professional lifestyle 24/7. And I think that's the challenge that burns athletes out as well, is that if you do make the right choices all of the time, it's all encompassing. And you know, Federer, LeBron, and all those, allegedly, I don't know their schedules, but sleep is absolutely vital to the point where they prioritize it. Nutrition is absolutely vital. They prioritize it. And these are the other things as a strength and conditioning coach, I again learn and talk about and try and immerse myself in the athlete education piece. Because for me, you can have the best paper program ever, but if the guys are partying till 3, they're eating terribly, they're not recovering properly, you're actually not getting the best out of that programming anyway.
Regardless.
And so your job as a coach is to, like you say, coactively educate, impact on behavioural change, because you can only impact on them for the 4 to 6 hours they're in the training building, for example. So what are they doing? What are they doing in their time off? You don't want to be invasive, don't get me wrong, but you want to make sure that 90% of the time they're eating properly. 100% of the time they're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, maybe ideally more, but it's impractical at times, I get that. But those are the things that actually are more impactful than sometimes your programming. I mean, as a coach, you're a performance coach, you're looking at psychology, you're looking at supplementation, you're looking at nutrition, you're looking at sleep, you're looking at hydration, and those things aren't technically strength and conditioning, but they obviously layer up with strength and conditioning, that's obvious, but it's like you're making more impact without actually coaching.
Absolutely. I think that, and I'm still geeky about like the program design stuff and you know, learning on that side of things, but about 7 years ago, I dove hardcore into psychology, behavior change, you know, pedagogy, social environments, like everything that can influence the person to do the stuff that's going to make them the best, you know. And when I went into it, I was so intrigued by it that like I got almost obsessed with it, you know, because I saw it even in my own life. It's like, well, we know what to do, but why don't we do it? You know, and then how do you get these guys at super high levels, or you know, anybody to just have them move that dial more towards optimal? You know, like
it is the synchronicity for me of all the moving parts and doing, you know, mastery and high performance. Everyone says, oh, high performance is about spending money on fancy toys. No, high performance is about doing the basics extraordinarily well.
Absolutely.
And that might sound cliche and a little bit kind of,
but it is. It's just fucking is. You know, it's like
mastery of yourself involves discipline. Do you want to do mindfulness at the end of the day to just decompress? Some do, some don't. Do you want to write a journal? Do you want to reflect? Do players even think that way? You know, I mean, Jeremy Shepherd, who's not far from here, who's an absolute gun of a performance coach working in Canada snowboard, you know, some of the stuff he thinks about around sort of the mental is absolutely fantastic. And like, again, I'm so fortunate that someone like that's in sort of my kind of professional network, because they're inspirational to us as coaches to just not just, like you say, go down the rabbit hole of purely physical preparation, but all the things that surround that. Self-care is massive as a coach and as a player, and all those things can kind of tease out in terms of how you choose to live your life without being kind of the monk who's sitting in Tibet. It's
absolutely,
like, you know, but excuse me, making better choices more often as a player will ultimately allow you to extend your career, which we started to talk about a little bit off air, because that's what we're in the job of doing as well. We're trying to give athletes the best possible opportunity, one, like I say, to showcase next week, but also future competitions, but also have career longevity, because ultimately in professional sport particularly, career longevity to the point where you add a year, you add a 2 year, you add a 3 year to the end of someone's career because they look after themselves effectively, is actually setting them up quite nicely for retirement, because in pro sport that could be a 7-figure income for another 3 years, which is a healthy retirement fund. I mean, we don't get, sadly, I don't know, I mean, us guys who are working on the flip side aren't quite making those sort of numbers, but we do have the ability to impact that positively on someone's career, whereby if you can extend someone's career by 3 years, they've got some healthy earning potential. And it might not just be about the money. It might be, like you've suggested also, it might be about helping the person. and helping them become a better person outside of their sport. And that too is a massively fulfilling process.
I think for all of us, it's probably one of the
Massive.
things that, I mean, I know for me, it's what pulled me in was that fulfillment.
Yeah,
you know,
massive. And it goes back to that conversation we had around going to the Olympics, right at the front end of the show, where the girl who went to the Olympics, one I still have enormous respect for. She's a retired athlete now, and transitioning out of sport has been a challenge for her. And I don't need to name any names, but also, like I said, the diligence and the person that she was helped me become a better coach, because it was just so fulfilling to see someone work so hard to achieve a goal, and did achieve a goal, and that was from the discipline of high performance, day in, day out, meal prepping. It's not a diet. It's meal prepping, not diet.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean. You're fueling performance, whatever it might be. Everything was goal orientated to get to the Olympics and beyond, and it's like that takes an enormous. Not many people, as I think some of those cliches again. Not many people have the dedication to prepare. They have the dedication to play their sport week in, week out, but they don't have the dedication to literally delve into the attention to detail,
which is where I feel like that's true greatness comes from.
Absolutely.
Like is from that. And I think that absolutely. And I think that not enough people, coaches too. You've been bringing this up throughout the show. It's one thing that I've noticed. Shining a light on all these athletes and what they've taught you, and I think it's phenomenal. I think it's actually a really big lesson that regardless if you work with athletes, we have some exceptional just human beings. Yeah. I think we have just amazing clients and members, and there's so many amazing things that they do, but so often you're so focused on yourself that you actually can't learn, these amazing things that they do. Like there's clients here that are, that we could learn from, that are so much better at stuff that we don't, that we don't do. And
absolutely. And that goes back full circle to the personal training piece.
Yeah.
So many people in that domain taught me so much about becoming a better coach subliminally. I've reflected back and found out, and like I said, I champion personal training now because I know there's a lot of ego and there's a lot of kind of, what's the word? Jesus. Egos and, what's the... This is the first time I got tongue-tied. I'm an hour in.
It'll come to you.
It will come to me. It's bugging me. What's it?
I know that, but probably one of the things that there's a distinct, like, even right when you talk in the industry, some people will be very, very upset. It's like, oh, you're a coach or you're a trainer. No, I'm a strength coach. It's like I'm a personal trainer. I'm a strength. Like there's this huge differentiation. But we're really all coaches, and we're trying to do the same thing. Yeah, maybe for a different population, but I think that's become like one of those fucking things that's just like very, very ego driven. Oh no, I'm a collegiate strength coach.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're training at the big box gym. Or the other way around. Like it doesn't matter, right? And not understanding that I think that divide just it doesn't do anything.
No, it is dividing. It is dividing, and it's like I say, the continuum is. You're either dealing with one person, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people. You should be in the industry to serve and basically facilitate growth of the person who's in front of you.
Great. Now, I know we've missed sort of 4 quadrants.
Yeah.
So moving into quadrant 4.
Yeah, quadrant 4 is essentially the guy who can look after themselves. But do you know what the irony is of quadrant 4? Quadrant 4 is someone who's actually going to ask more questions and almost get back to go full circle to 1 and actually have you, the coach.
It's almost like relearning.
Go back to, because they've evolved as well. So just say that over that quadrant 1 to 4, that may be a 10, 12, 15-year period. So there's very few, unfortunately, in this day and age, there's very few coaches who are going to work from an athlete's from their players' infancy through to their full kind of career progression.
That's very
so I was lucky.
But you know what though? When you say that, I actually think that for coaches, what happens is coaches go from being in quadrant 1 to 2 to 3, like, hey, I'm kind of, and they go to 4, like I can do it all myself. But I think coaches need to go back to quadrant 1 to become better. It's. I still,
revisiting everything,
having somebody like I seriously, I'm very, very, I'm like, hey, listen, man, I want to do like 8 to 12 weeks of straight up VBT, and like let's mess around with it. Like let's do it. And I'll be the guinea pig, and I'm gonna learn, and you're gonna, I'm
absolutely.
I'm all about that stuff. But that, to me, that's going from, because I feel very confident in my programming. I mean, it's like I'm an obsessive human being, so like that's all I fucking do is study.
Yeah, sure.
But it's like to drop that and go like, yep, I'm just blank slate. Let me go to Quadrant and want to be guided, and I think that.
Well, do you know what? That's what they want. So some of those Quadrant 4 athletes,
they
or
actually
players
want that.
rather, and they will end up having the prescription off the coach, especially if they've got a very, very strong and positive and trustful relationship with that coach. So I'll give you just a quick case study. I was fortunate enough to basically work with a couple of Welsh guys who went from the Blues Academy right the way through to senior international level in the 9 years that I was in the program.
That's amazing.
Subsequently, some of them have retired, but that is the opportunity to go from Quadrant 1 to Quadrant 2 to Quadrant 3 to Quadrant 4. So over a 10-year period, 9-year period. Yeah. But yeah, the guys, they wanted, even at the highest level, playing for their country, captaining their country, being world-renowned in their particular sport and having a very high profile. They wanted that connectivity with the coach. They wanted to be part of the process. They wanted to be immersed in their own physical development. Some guys they were like, give me the program, I'll just get on with it. Some guys really, really immerse themselves into the whys. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Not in an aggressive manner, but they want to know why we're doing everything.
I actually love that. I love that. Yeah.
You're almost auditing your program through your athletes all of the time. Why are we doing this? And that also helps you strip away the stuff that's unnecessary.
Agreed.
And that helps you realize that, so-and-so. And the one great thing about that particular time period in my life was that the very fast twitch fiber guys needed way less volume. So Sam needed less volume than a guy called Bradley, who's another unbelievable character. Again, stories for off air on those kind of characters. But he was a workhorse. He was a second row player. One was a back row player. One was an outside back. And you're just balancing the demands of each individual sports player, but also each individual's physiology. And you could find out that through your benchmarking,
you know what's crazy
your
is
profiling, and all that stuff.
You brought that up. Jay just put up a post. We talk about it all the time. That guys that usually put on a ton of muscle, easier, right, are usually very laid back in life, very parasympathetic.
Yeah, no, I saw that this morning.
Because we've talked about that for years,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I mean, I've got a good amount of muscle now, but I'm a nutcase. Like me and Jay, like we're just sympathetic. I hit the ground running. I'm crazy, right? And so you need, it's different. Like those people actually need less volume, and it's a lot of times less intensity. And you bring that up, and it's like, how do you learn those things? Unless you're, I mean, sure, you study the greats and you learn from the greats, and you go into the courses and the books and the certs, but a lot of that stuff is like, it's like Louis Simmons says, the answers are found in a weight room or in a field.
Time under the bar and all that.
Time under the bar.
And that's where, again, it goes back to that human element.
Yeah.
And there's been a ton of trial and error. And like you've suggested, if I look back and reflect on some of the things I did, I made mistakes. But also, you've got to learn from those mistakes, but you've also got to have the open mind to challenge yourself, learn from other areas of performance, and it might not be that strength and power was your strength, so you go down that road. It might be that speed was your strength, so you bias towards that, whatever it might be. But you have got to keep immersing yourself in the learning process to the point where you've got to be open to ideas, and it might be open to ideas from outside your domain as well. Creativity in the industry, like the Red Bull type athlete and those kind of action sports athletes, they inspire me all the time.
Oh yeah,
because they're doing things that are off the wall.
Oh, it's crazy.
Crazy.
Did you read the book, The Rise of Superman?
No, who's that?
Great book.
Yeah.
It's the same guy that Jamie Neal. He wrote Stealing Fire.
Yeah, Stealing Fire. So I read that. Love it.
Yeah. So he wrote the first book, Rise of Superman, which really kind of goes into how to that the people that figured out how to get into the zone and what the zone truly is, right? The flow state. Yeah. That nobody's done it better than extreme sport athletes. Sure. And if you look crazy. At it's nuts. I mean, but the thing is, like, think about what it says is like, look at Olympic weightlifting. Last 40 years, the record has been broken by this much, right? But in extreme sports, they said that nobody will ever do be able to do a forward backflip, on a motorcycle, and then Travis Pastrana did it twice.
Yep.
And then now there's kids or nobody was able to do a 10-20, on a skateboard, and then a 14-year-old kid do it after, because
Big air. When you win Olympic gold in Sochi in 2018, you won't even get on the podium with that score in 2022.
Right, that's crazy.
That's what I love about obviously talking with Jeremy and that whole wheelhouse there. But that's
because the limits are so stretched.
Look where the Olympics are going as well with the sports they're involving. Like you say, skateboarding. I mean, traditionalists will probably be freaking out, but I love all that.
Yeah.
You're integrating real life, evolving life, skateboarding,
it's evolution.
Speed climbing, snowboarding.
Yeah, agree.
Whatever else is going into it. It's awesome because it also, from our point of view as practitioners, challenges us to learn faster than everybody else. Because those guys in big air are coming down from 30, 40 feet.
It's
you
insane.
Think about the science and the physics involved in that sort of stuff. You've got some sort of high level academics, but you've also got the practicalities of, if you don't land this,
you're broken.
It's hospital or podium.
Yeah.
It's hospital or gold medal. It's like, and those guys, the psychology of that. You
see,
forget about the physiology.
Yes, that was what I was going to say. It's like, we have more to learn from pushing those limits where somebody's like, well, I know I could die, but I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
And it's like the one that got
still go for it.
They go for it. And then it was the guy that free climb, which that
amazing. Alex Holland,
Hammond. Was it?
That's
Honnold,
it.
yeah,
That's it. You get his surname right.
They said it was a 4-hour climb, but it said basically they said, well, there was 900 opportunities for him to make a mistake, and at each one of them he'd be dead. 900 times he picked the right one. But the thing is, how many times would you bet that on your right? Like, and spent years. But that's a mental type of, and you go, and we need to.
But going back to that free solo, just quickly, sorry to cut across you. Look how much high performing preparation went into that. He managed and visualized that whole face for, I don't know,
years.
I think
it was 9 years. I think it was 9 years altogether.
So because that's being prepared to take high performance to the absolute elite level, and that not many people have got the diligence to prepare to do anything of that particular nature. Felix Baumgartner jumping out of that stratospheric spaceship at 120
So
hours. I watched that live and I was like, we're thinking about, it's great, don't get me wrong, collision sport, gladiatorial, rugby, football, anything on the ground. I took massive inspiration from the high performance that goes into someone moving through the air at 600 and something miles an hour from space, landing, surviving, taking human performance and potential to absolutely new heights. Yeah. That inspires me as a performance coach. And it's not just like, my 5x5 or my 5x3 or my 4x4. That is just bullshit.
He jumped out of space.
What program was he on? It's the coactive nature of all of those moving parts. Yeah. What did he do? Yeah. Well, I tell you what he had to get his right first, probably his breath work.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to pass out going 600 miles an hour, et cetera, et cetera.
And I mean, if you, there's a little documentary on it. I don't know if you watched it. But it was
Mike Gervais did the psychology stuff, who's local. Yeah. He's a Seahawks sports psychologist. All those moving parts fascinate me. And if you have that level of curiousness, you will continue to hopefully thrive in the performance environment. That kind of is
that's what I love about it. Like, we'll never get there because what is there? Like, it's just going to keep moving.
Someone's going to move the goalposts.
Yeah, exactly.
He went from 128,000 feet. I think someone else broke it relatively quickly soon after. I can't remember the name, but he was the pioneer. Yeah. So I only remember his name, but someone else will jump from 150. Someone else will then jump from Cape Canaveral, or I don't know what's up there. Some satellite up there. Whatever.
Yeah.
But that is human performance. And like you said, we're trying to push the boundaries in traditional sports, which is great. But there are people out there, and this goes back to this sort of whole performance mindset of, anyone from Google's execs to Amazon's execs to Boeing's execs to fighter pilots to military to, the world is endless, and the opportunities are endless. That's what frustrates me about coaches who think there's no opportunities. There are. You've just got to think about them in a slightly different frame. Yeah. That's the big one for me.
And I would say that more than ever, and I would say, for years and years now, you read Range from Dave Epstein.
Yeah, well, I'm actually 3/4 through, but yeah.
It's a little bit, it's a great book. It's a little dry, but it's great. But it's, and to me, that's I'm grateful and fortunate that I've been involved in so many things in my life, some stupid things, but have also
And we
helped
all.
me. But what it's done is like allowed me to really think laterally and
Massively.
not be confined and like whether I want to look at somebody that's the best gardener in the world, I'm going to get something from them to be able to bring
Well,
strength and
that's a
conditioning.
massive lesson and a massive idea to share with young coaches who are quite blinkered in their thinking and actually think, yes, we still need to understand the fundamentals of strength and conditioning and the principles that apply. And again, not wanting to steal an Altis kind of meme or whatever, but Stu says the same. You've got to know what the rules are in order to be able to break
rules,
them.
yeah.
But I think a lot of our coaches in strength and conditioning particularly are quite blinkered to just strength and conditioning and not thinking outside of that for their learning and their practical application and their development. And that's a big one
to a
for
degree,
us to take home.
You know what I've told like S&C coaches and said, hey man, go do a weekend with the Four Seasons for customer experience.
Massive.
And they're like, why would I do that? I see, you're not getting it.
No, this is
you're
exactly
not getting it.
Great
you know,
point.
Like,
Great point. I think one of the I follow, and I mean I don't follow an enormous amount of people on social media, but on Twitter I follow Ritz-Carlton customer service.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Because I was fortunate enough to have my honeymoon at the Ritz-Carlton and going back a few years. I should know exactly which date, and I do, but I won't share it online. But
We'll put it in the show notes.
No, put it in the show notes. But the customer experience there, like you said, just in terms of if you work in the service industry and we work in the service industry, like you say, you want to go and learn from some of the best when it comes to service provision and what they're prepared to do for their customer.
Yeah,
and I follow. It's Ritz-Carlton Leadership, I think, on social media.
Ritz-Carlton Leadership.
Yeah.
Take that down.
Yeah.
But same thing, I got really, really intrigued in, social work. The social workers that deal with trauma,
Dealing with difficult people. And it's like,
it's not
of circumstance sometimes.
Do you think that if you got really good at that you'd be able to deal better with? Do people that we coach have trauma and issues in life? Do we have everybody does, right? So I mean, it's just the thing is to be able to go like get out of this, just. Get out and come back, and like you'll be better.
Absolutely.
I think that's very, very crucial. And if more people that are respected need to bring it to light, so that somebody goes like, maybe I'll go do that. And I'm going to actually a Danny Meyer. Like I'm a massive fan. I don't know if Danny Meyer, greatest restaurateur of our time, probably. Okay. 25 James Beard Awards. He started the Shake Shack, but before Shake Shack, he has 12 restaurants that are unbelievable in New York City.
Okay.
And one of my favorite business books / it's a story, it's a business book, it's customer experience, is called Setting the Table.
Right.
I've reread it over and over and over again. It's phenomenal. I'm also a foodie, and I'm going to New York for a 4-day. Thankfully, I know somebody that knows somebody really high up that works for the organization with Danny Meyer. I said, hey, listen, man, I can get you in here. And I'll still pay, which, it's a pretty big chunk of money, to be honest, like thousands of dollars to do 4 days.
Yeah.
But I was like, I saw it, so man, I got to go to that because it's, I'm such a big fan of anything that the hospitality group does, but their philosophy around how they treat people, how they do, and I'm like, I got to get in. And some people are like, wouldn't you want to spend money? And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like that might be the best money spent. And then everything that the things that I've learned in strength and conditioning and fitness will probably be more useful with these insights, and I think if we do that, we'll all be better. Man, I know we're gonna do another one because I know we could talk for forever, which is what I absolutely love. But it's been a pleasure. What we said we'd do, we definitely did it. It was just like we went into conversation. So I really
talk for 2 hours.
Absolutely,
Awesome.
I appreciate this,
Hopefully
man.
Someone will listen and take some value from it.
Definitely, I know this was definitely valuable. Where can people find out more about you? Follow the Seawolves, obviously. At Seattle Seawolves Rugby.
At Seattle Seawolves Rugby.
On IG, yep.
So I'm very predictable. Chris Toombs 71 is my Instagram and my Twitter feeds.
Good. I'm gonna
relatively active, but
good. This is the thing is I'm gonna push more traffic to you, so you have to put up more of your wisdom and knowledge.
I'd love to put more up, and that's maybe our collaborations of the future.
No, absolutely. And we talked about this, but I'm for sure want to do this, but like doing a seminar for velocity based training, a VBT seminar here at Vigor. We're definitely gonna do that.
Sure.
That's a done deal. We'll just figure out the dates. We'll announce it. I'm certainly, like I said, I've had some experience with it, but not nearly as much as Chris here, and so we definitely want to learn.
Awesome.
So we'll do that for sure. Follow Chris. Follow the Seawolves. go to the games if you get tickets, because
Yes.
they sell out,
They
my
sell
friend.
out.
They sell out.
They sell out.
Pretty damn popular here. But with that said, guys, as always, appreciate it. Share it if you've loved it. Share it when we share it. Everybody learns. Leave a review. I appreciate you guys tuning in. You could be anywhere else, but you're here listening to this, so thank you for that. I can't tell you how much it means to me. With that said, Coach Luca, Chris, we'll see you next time.
Thank
Peace
you.
out.
Cheers.